right, and welcome into another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Super excited to be with you again today. First off, thank you for listening wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you're mowing the lawn right now, thanks for listening. If you're giving the kids a bath, thanks for listening. Whatever you're doing, just thank you for listening. Much appreciated. Before we jump in, before we do the thing here like we always do, I want to give a encouraging word to please go down to the description of wherever you're listening. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Podcast, wherever you're getting the podcast today. And go down and hit the subscribe link to the email newsletter. Definitely helps out the show. Great way to support. Great way to get early access to the show. Great way to get some dad hacks, dad advice, and mental health tips. All in one. Be the first to know about new episodes. Be the first to know about all the things coming up, all the things going on here with the Young Dad Podcast. So make sure to hit that. Without further ado, this is a part 2 for us, but you guys didn't know that. Eric, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you. Eric, you are the host of All Things Dad Podcast. It's also a blog with the ultimate goal of helping build better dads, leaders, and people. You became a dad in 2020, so had a COVID baby. I mean, didn't we all?
Yeah.
It wasn't planned to be a COVID baby, but it happened. I feel like COVID babies are the ones born in 2022 and 20, more or less. But yeah, man, welcome to the show. Tell us about you. Tell us about your platform, and yeah.
Yeah. So good morning. First off, thanks for having me on, and anyone listening, thank you. Yeah, make sure you subscribe. Jay's doing awesome things here at the Young Dad Podcast. So yes, my name is Eric Andris. I am 32, live in the Midwest, and basically came up with this idea to try to help other dads and give other dads and young men resources, because I felt like when I was going through the time of having a newborn a couple years ago, well, now it's been 4, I guess. But I had a really hard time finding resources. Like my wife was able to, get on Google and search for different things and be able to find those things and find resources that she could read and help herself, or listen to and help her kind of just get to know more about being a mom and different things that she wasn't really sure about. And I was having a really hard time finding resources from the dad side of things. So that's kind of when the idea popped into my brain about like, how can I help other men and dads get this experience that I feel like I'm having a hard time finding. So, in full transparency, it really started with when babies are really young. And I thought that I was the only one that experienced this, as a man, and as a dad, and especially as a new dad, I felt really like I was having a really hard time connecting with my first newborn. It wasn't as easy for me as it seemed, like it was for my wife. And I felt like a really bad dad early on because of that. Turns out, fast forward, have this conversation with a lot of men. Turns out most men feel this way when their first kid is born. You're like, okay, what do I do? Mom's been able to connect a lot more throughout this last 9 months, and it just seems more natural to mom. Why does it not feel natural to me? So resources starting there, and then just kind of growing, everything from leadership in helping people grow, leadership inside and outside the home, people grow in their faith, helping people grow in mental health and become more mature in their own mental health in ways that they can help themselves to be able to help other people. So I think it's just a way to just try to help build better dads, leaders, and people. Really is simply the mission of All Things Dad. So
I love that. I think that's so important, because what I feel like now, if I would have a kid today and first time dad, first time looking for everything, I feel like there's more booths at the event center, versus the back 7-8 years ago when I first became a dad. It felt, especially because I lived in Idaho, so it felt like there was just an empty event center, which is like 100 by 100 room kind of thing, because it's Idaho and it's small. And but now, like, fast forward to today, it feels like there's a lot more out there. Like, we have a pretty solid like expo to like have for like first time dads, for like resources and podcasts and blogs and programs and people to talk to and communities and things to find. But if you still compare it to moms, they can sell out a whole freaking football arena expo, and they'll have a booth in every other seat at, I don't know, I just thought of Lucas Oil Stadium. They'll have a booth at every other seat in whatever your biggest stadium near you is. Like that's just the size difference. Like we get like an event center, and that it's pretty full, 6 foot tables and everything. But the market's a lot better now, but it's still not quite there. I feel like there's still some parts of it that are still under under the underdeveloped. Um, and what I mean by that is that it's not. I feel like a lot of the resources that are out there are very short term. They're not. They were kind of started in a blink. Someone had a purpose. Not saying yourself, but other resources like the booth is only going to be there. Let's say the event's from 9 to 5 on a Saturday. That booth is only going to be there from 9 to 11, kind of thing. It's a really good booth though, but it's only 9 to 11. And so the resources are kind of hit and miss. Like they kind of start and then they tail off, and then it's like, where to go, kind of thing. And then it's not replaced. The market doesn't replenish itself essentially. And it feels like there's still some pretty strong bouncers just to let dads into the resources to help them find it, to help them find the good one at least. Yourself, myself, plenty other men I talk to, plenty other dads I talk to, essentially my whole guest catalog on the podcast. But it still feels like there's something there though. It still feels like there's a big barrier there that I don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, I think for a lot of men too, it's still that there's a deep-rooted fear in being too vulnerable, especially as a new parent and as a new dad, that we can really dive into from the mental health perspective. But, a lot of the things that we do are rooted either, in powerlessness or in fear of something, in fear of not seeming competent as a dad, in fear of these things. But in reality, when you have young kids, there is a lot of fear because you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. But I think that traditional masculinity, in its own sense of the word, there's a lot of fear there that men won't admit. And because of that, men then have a harder time going to seek out resources that actually would help them. So I think that's a huge part of it, is just kind of putting that wall down and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and honest with yourself that you don't know. We don't have all the answers, and there are other men and dads and people out there who might not have the answers, but might help you connect some of the dots for yourself, if that makes sense. So that's just kind of how I see it from a dad's perspective, especially as we get into this, you're probably somewhere between 17, 18 and mid 20s. Like there's still a lot of maturing in life to do, especially with mental health. And now we're introducing children to this and significant others and this whole other, there's so much on the back end of our brains that goes into this process that I think just gets skipped and overlooked sometimes. So there's a lot to be said for that. As you know, you live in the field. So
I do, and I think you're totally right. I think the biggest wall for ourselves is ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can stem that back to generation. In a sense, it's generational trauma, and in a sense, to try to put like a label that makes sense on it, because it's things that we want to break down. You can also add in societal expectations,
Yeah.
stereotypes, gender stereotypes. There's a lot of things you can mix into the equation here. But ultimately, it's just kind of like that fear that just has stemmed from generation to generation to generation, and kind of been projected onto us by those who raised us. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of where it comes from. But then you're totally right too. The other side of it is when you're living it. I would say even now, young men who are 18 to 25, I feel like even when they hit 25 and that frontal lobes develop, granted everyone's different, but I feel even now like people turning 25, they were born in 1999. So they're barely born on the cusp of the 2000s, which I know makes us both feel old.
Yeah.
But you look at an 18-year-old born in how much has happened since two kind of thing, right? And so I feel like they're going into adulthood not set up for any sort of success in any sort of way whatsoever, to where they're essentially set up to fail going into adulthood, whether that's financially, academically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like they're set up to fail in almost every domain, I feel, unless they have a good set of parents. They have involved parents that guided them in the right path and whatnot, which is of course the goal. But I feel like more often than not, is not what happens. So now, them going into the mix, them getting into these stages, I feel that they're more behind than people have ever been at their age. Like they have more maturing to catch up on. They have more knowledge to gain. They have more things to learn, because I think there's a big sense of entitlement among that age range, to where they're just expecting it to be given to them, where they're expecting things to just change magically overnight, but they're just not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. And so when you mix in having the relationship, which they're probably neither of them is mentally, emotionally, or physically ready for, the problem in itself, because they lack communication skills, because the only way they've communicated their entire lives is through a screen. But now they're trying to live with someone, parent with someone, grow with someone, and they just don't know how. They have no clue how. And then you add kids into the mix, they're probably developmentally a couple of years behind. Yes, they graduated high school. Everyone graduates high school if you show up and you do enough, kind of thing. And they graduate high school, they have kids, 19, 20, 21. They're still probably about 18, 19 years old, and they're just immature still. They're trying to have a kid, and then it all just doesn't work out. Their relationship fails. Now the kid's from a broken household, and then hopefully they learn, grow, they grow up from that, and then they find something better and all the things. And the next kid, if there are any more kids, is better off than that first one, which is sad. But I feel like that's kind of part of the big wall, is that there's a big sense of self that's missing, and men are in their own ways, kind of thing. So
Yeah, I think there's twofold. Social media, for as many positives as it brings double that in negatives, right? So in terms of like the want and the willingness to work hard and see that good things actually take time, instead of you can scroll through any social media and have any business development person who makes $30,000 a day without talking on Instagram, are there, and people think that they can just do that. So I think that's part of the issue. Kind of backtracking on what you were talking about at first too, the whole generational curse thing. I don't think I would have ever seen it as that 10 years ago. I'm 32. But it's breaking the generational curse, no matter how bad the curse was. So my story is, I grew up upper middle class. Everything was fine. My parents got divorced when I was young. I mean, young, 5, 6 years old, but lived a couple miles from each other. We stayed 50-50. My parents were both cordial ish. I mean, as cordial as you would expect them to be. Grew up with all the things, but I would always laugh. So like a month ago, my grandfather, my dad's dad, was in the hospital just with kind of some AFib and some cardiac issues. He's in his 80s. I drove up to Toledo where he was in the hospital at, and it was him, my dad, and me. So my dad's dad, my father, and myself. They are both very stoic men. Like, I don't know if I ever got I'm proud of you from him. Great dad. He has done everything in the world for my brother and I, but I don't know if I ever heard that from him. And he gets it honestly. Like, I look at my grandfather and he has a hard time like hugging his grandkids. He just is very straight edge, very stoic, and never really been like shown love. Like, he doesn't show love, doesn't. And my dad did a little bit more than him, but not really. So, I look at that and I'm like, that is exactly what I don't want to be, and being in 10 years ago, I wouldn't have ever said that. But I look at that and I'm like, man, I tell my kids I'm proud of them so much. And I give my kids and I shower my kids with so many hugs and so much love. And I think it's just because I see that and I felt not having that, and I don't want my kids to feel not having that. So it's like turning generational curses into generational blessings, right? So it's kind of like, how do we see what we went through, whether it was really, really bad or whether it was just like my experience, right? I wouldn't say my experience is really, really bad because I grew up, everything was just fine. But I did see things and I experienced things that I don't want my kids to experience. And that's helped make me a better father. So yeah, it's just kind of turning those curses into blessings for our kids, right?
I agree with that, and I feel like it's so easy for a lot of men to not have that perspective to where they make that conscious choice to take it from, because it was projected. The thing that was projected on you was this be stoic, be a stone, be a wall, be unemotional. That was what was projected, whether consciously or subconsciously, whether they realized it or not. Like your grandpa, that was probably how his dad was to him, and now that's how he was to your dad, and your dad was, that's how he was to you and your brother. A little bit different, but more or less, the
Yep.
same with some things different kind of thing. So that could have very easily been projected onto you, whether he even realized he was trying to do that or not. Because that's just,
Mm-hmm.
what was up here and what was learned and what was taught kind of thing. And so that was go away. Um, and so very easily that could have gotten mixed up. Instead, what you've done, what more men need to do, is essentially be able to have that self-evaluation in the moment and say, "Hey, I'm gonna do things a little bit different. I'm gonna do things different. I'm gonna not do things the way I was taught them, unless they were taught good. Unless you were taught, all the right things and did all the right things, and definitely be that person. And I think dads who are those people comes very naturally to them, because that's what they saw, that's what they're used to, that's what makes sense to them. But I feel like a lot more men than not um, are kind of that way, where we don't know. It's just kind of unconscious. Like we just naturally, it's what naturally comes to us, unfortunately, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
was naturally taught to us, and we don't know how to push back against that. We're unable to flip that switch in our brains because it's hard, it's scary. It's like, well, what's on the other side of that? And I can tell you firsthand, the hardest things in life and the best things in life are on the other side of fear. The other side of fear is such a beautiful place because when you finally you hit that fear up, you look it right in the eyes and you walk straight through it. Literally, fear is just like an inanimate object that's just hollow and empty. It's like a big ghost, like one of those shadows on TV where it looks
Yeah.
scary and then you end up walking toward it and you put your hand out and it's like translucent. So you can just walk right through it. Maybe you'll get a little slimy or something, but the other side of that fear is such a cool, beautiful place because it holds everything that you're afraid of getting right now. It holds those being able to break those generational curses and turn them into generational blessings. It holds the things that you're essentially afraid of, and it holds like you can look back behind you later and be like, man, why was I afraid of that for so long? Like I feared that one thing for 10 years. Man, I feared showing my kid unlimited love. It, but it's so great now here. I feared having open communication and talking to my wife about all these things. I feared this or that or this or that, and it's really so much better to not be afraid of that and to be doing it now. To be living through that fear and to be living out the thing I was afraid of because it's so much better. The things that we're afraid of doing, the things that we're afraid of changing, they're better on the other side of that fear.
Yeah, and there's a great book. I mean, Brene Brown has a lot of great material, but there's a great book by her called Daring Greatly that really just talks about vulnerability and the importance of authenticity and vulnerability in life for anything, not just for parenting, but for anything and anyone, how important it is for us to be able to be vulnerable. And that goes hand in hand with overcoming fear. And a lot of times, she goes into a lot in that book. On the contrary of that is, why are we afraid of things? Is because we're ashamed of things. So there's a lot of talk on shame and how do we get over shame, by being more vulnerable in our lives with everyone. So great book, great resource. She has a podcast and all of that too, but that book I found to be really great.
Yeah, Brene Brown is fantastic. Um, just solid all around. Lots of great material that she's put out over the years. Um, big fan, big fan there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit about what All Things Dad is. So what about you, Eric? Who's Eric? Like, who's the man behind the microphone? What do you do for during the day? What do you do during the night? What do you do from your 9 to 5? You're 5 to 9. You're 5 to 9. You're whatever. You know, the 9 to 5. Then you have like your 5 to 9s and things like that. Who's the man? Who's the man during those 9 to 5s?
My background is in exercise science and physical therapy. Actually, I graduated from the University of Toledo in Ohio in 2016 with my doctorate in physical therapy, my clinical doctorate. So I worked outpatient with sports medicine and with athletes and with physicians and providers for a number of years, and then transferred to within the same hospital system down a little bit south in West Central Ohio, where I now manage our sports medicine team. So I work a lot with a lot of our sports medicine providers, our athletic trainers, and our community schools and contracts. And then that has kind of grown to overseeing some other contracts that our hospital works with throughout our region and our communities. So I do a lot on the outside. But it's been great because it allows me to get to know different people and different perspectives. In that's my day to day. Aside from that, I stay busy. Obviously, the podcast. I have two facets of All Things Dad. Really, in terms of the podcast, I have where I do my interviews with different people and different dads and leaders and faith leaders in our communities is one facet. Those are 30 to 45-minute episodes. And then I also do a short series where I do practical applications, everything from like getting started to time management to how do we keep motivation and discipline so those are really like 3 to 5 to 7 minute series. So I do kind of shorts and then longer interviews as part of that. And then kind of trifold, I do some with my dad, has some mechanical engineering, food processing businesses. So I do some outside sales work with him as well, just kind of out and about, since I already do that on my day to day. So it kind of fits in as I basically just get to network and talk to people and build and drive relationships. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. My kids I have 2 children, 2 boys. Hudson will be 4 at the end of June, and Emmett will be 2 in a couple weeks. So almost 4, almost 2, and they keep us plenty busy as well.
I bet. What was it like for you, man, going from a 0 to 1? Like when your wife first told you, hey babe, you're gonna be a dad. Like, how was she gonna surprise you? I'm sure it was like cute and adorable. Um, but what was that? What was kind of that initial like feeling? Like, man, like holy crap, I'm gonna be a dad. What was your like oh crap moment? Oh crap, I'm gonna be a dad.
That's what it was. It was straight for me. I think there was probably 2% excitement and 98% what the heck did I just get myself into? Honestly, because we had talked about it a little bit. I wouldn't say that we were actively trying, but we were like, oh, at this point in our lives, we're married. We lived in Ohio for a while together. We moved out to the western part of Colorado for a while. We moved back. So we did some traveling, some adventuring. We're like, at this point, if something happens, it happens. And I don't know if it was, but a month later when she came up, was like, oh, here's this news. I was like, oh, that was faster than I thought.
So she probably, so if it was maybe even a month later, do you think she already kind of knew?
I don't know. She could have, but it was pretty quick. I'm like, okay, well, if it happens, it happens. And then
last week.
Yeah. So for us, it was pretty quick. But I think for me, honestly, it was a lot more fear than excitement because I think I was like many other just men and people in general. They're like, there is excitement down there, but it's like am I actually ready for this? Am I prepared for this? Are we financially okay to be here? Are we, like, so many things go through the back of my mind, and I'm very type A, like make lists, be organized.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're first finding out about having a kid and you've never been a dad, that there are a lot of things that you just don't have answers to, So, I think for me, it was super stressful, more than anything, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. All I remember from my first kid really is it feels like it was so long ago. But yet it feels like it was just not that long ago either. I just remember being stressed like all the time. It was just stress. It was just that. I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's next. I'm scared. I'm like I'm excited. Like I've always wanted to be a dad, but now that I'm actually about to be a dad, I don't want to be a dad, but I do want to be a dad. Like I'm 21. Like I'm 20, 21. Like I'm a little bit young for this. Like I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't have any like friends or family here. Like I don't know what to do. This is gonna be weird. Like what even is a baby? How do I even take care of the thing? Like I'm barely old enough like to be taking care of myself. Like it was a whole thing, and it was crazy. But then how about for you guys going from one to two, because they're only about 2 years apart, right? A little bit
A
more than
little
two
under
years
that.
apart.
Yep.
So what was that like going
Yeah, a
from
little.
one to two for you guys?
Yeah, they're 18. I don't know, whatever. They're a little under 2 years apart. It was obviously you now know what to expect, right? You're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can change diapers. We've already got the family health insurance, like all your other things that you worry about the first time are like, okay, like, that's all easy. And then you get the excitement, and then it was for me. So the first one we found out Hudson was a boy. Second one, my wife really didn't want to find out, which stressed me out because I'm like, I'd rather just know and be prepared, like we already talked about. So we didn't know and weren't prepared, but did have another boy. So we're like, oh, we already have everything. So all right, no sweat. Um, but it was great. Honestly, 1 to 2 is a lot harder than 0 to 1, just for the fact of it's a lot harder to have breaks, right? Between parents, it becomes really challenging. But every phase, obviously, there's good and bad with every phase. There's not good and bad. There's good and challenging with every phase. So as they get older and start to play a little bit more, my wife was just sent me a video this morning of our kid, them sitting on the couch with our oldest just reading a book to our youngest this morning, and that, like that stuff is the super cute stuff that it's few and far between as they start to fight over everything. Yeah, it was just I think it's just challenging in its own ways, right? But it is awesome because it brings, the more kids you bring in, they just bring all these different dynamics to your family. So you can see your children balance each other out, and then as your children get older, you can see them balance you out. Like it's kind of a cool thing.
Definitely. I think about that sometimes where I'm like I would have been okay with just my oldest. Like sometimes I'll think I would have been okay just having her. Like things would have been fine. Like her being the only child like that would have been fine. And then I like think about it again, and I'm like, man, but if I didn't have my little one, like life would be a whole lot more boring.
Yes.
Life would not be as exciting as it is. Like my second one, she is the life of every party. Not even a party. She's just the life of wherever she goes. She's always making people laugh. She's always getting into something. She's always causing her sister torment. She's always, humbling everybody. She's talking and everything, and she's 3. She's going on 4. She's very much talking. But now she's smart, and she picks up on like what you're saying, and she finishes your sentences. Um, if you like pause before you get to the last word, it's like I'm gonna send you to timeout. Like she hears it and she's already thinking. So just like the level of depth to her, because I guess the first one is your first one, right? Your
Yeah.
first one is the one that everything you do with your older child is the first time. Every single thing you ever do with your older child will be the first time you ever do those things. The first time you as a dad get to experience all those things. So then your second one, you kind of know a little bit more. You know what you're doing a little bit more. So you know how to work with them, you know how to talk to them and stuff. And I just think it's so interesting because my little one, she's so intelligent. Like she's so smart. Like she is on top of everything. Like she does not miss a beat ever. Like she's always on top of it, no matter what. She'll say what she means and she'll mean what she says. Like she doesn't take anything back. She doesn't apologize. She's smart. She's quick. She's so fast. Like she would be a great comedian someday because she can just think on her feet so well. And she just like snaps and she's funny and she just like she can zing you so quickly and she's just so intelligent. She's just so intelligent. And I love that about the second child because like I think a lot of second children are I don't know if this is like a thing, but I feel like for me, like my two kids, like my first one incredibly successful. Uh because she has so much structure and discipline and like rules and everything like for her kind of thing. But the second one, like last night, perfect example of this. My older one's getting in trouble. She's throwing a fit. She's having a few moments. And I try to, do the count to five thing. She's not listening. She's not following direction. Two, she notices the five count and I'm giving it to her and she's just like, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm good. I'm gonna be the good kid right now. And so it's just so interesting how they pick up on this because she was good and she was even saying like when we were leaving where we were at and getting in the car, she's like, my sissy crying, my sissy having a bad night. But I'm good, Dada. I'm like, you're so mean. And then her sister's yelling at her, stop it, kind of thing. And she's just there,
Yeah.
living her life. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I couldn't do it if I didn't have the two. I would be so bored with just the one.
Yeah, it's funny that as you get older and you have, more kids and you get used to more chaos, it's funny to think back to like, oh my gosh, what did we do when we didn't have any kids? What did we do when we only had one kid? What did we, it's like it's always living this like, oh my gosh, how is it so much different now than it was then? But we're still figuring it out. Life's challenging with no kids, right? So it's like, how do you continue to balance that? But it's hard, but it's super worth it. Yeah.
So I guess, speaking of balance here, great segue. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I was like, I need a buzzword. Give me a buzzword. Speaking of balance, for you, kind of think back between each kid, between when you first became a dad and to today. How have you balanced just all things, I guess, work, but primarily like your own like mental health? Um, because like I feel after for me personally, my first kid, I was so young, like my brain wasn't fully developed yet. And I'm trying to raise a newborn. Um, and then I was divorced at 25. Divorced by 25. That's the dream. One kid divorced by 25 kind of thing. And it was like my brain was barely developed, and all this stuff happened, and like I feel like my mental health was just so all over the place raising my older daughter for those first 2 years because I was working so much. Work took so much out of me. It took so much of like my brain power. It took so much of just like everything I was, everything of my being just to get through work. I was a GM of a Sonic for a bit. I was an assistant store manager of a Walmart. And then then I worked for Pepsi as like a sales manager kind of thing. So once I got to Pepsi, things were a lot better. I was a lot happier and a lot more grown by then. Which makes sense because I was about 25. And previously before that, like I was just so miserable, like all the time. Like I was so angry just so quickly. Like things would just set me off. Like I would just snap. Because I wasn't able to, and like I wasn't able to control it. Like my mental health was so bad. I was so depressed. I was so tired. I was so angry. Like everything in life was just so bad. And I think back, and I think a lot of it was for me was different, like postpartum things. Was postpartum like anxiety? Was postpartum depression? Were these postpartum things that were really weighing on me? That like I had no clue. This was like 7, 8 years ago. And I was just so young, and it was Idaho, and so it was so underserved, so underdeveloped. Southeast Idaho at that, which is even more rural than Western Idaho kind of thing, Boise area. It's like the opposite side of Boise. And so it's just so like thinking about it now, it's just like, man, I was a mess. And then by the time my second kid was born, I was in such a better place mentally. I was working a okay job. I was here in the city I live in now, which has been really very kind to me. I'm very blessed to live where I live now. Second kid was born, 4 or 5 months later, divorce happened. And so it was just a kind of wild and crazy ride. But even after that, it was just like, man, now I got to take care of everything on my own. I was barely around for the first one, so now I'm trying to relearn all these things. I was trying to learn, like, man, how do I get up? Like, do I set alarms? Do I just like kind of get up? Do I just kind of do it? Like, what do I do? Because I was working a lot of overnight when my first daughter was born. I was an overnight assistant store manager at Walmart. I mean, I was making really good money, but I just wasn't there. So of course, that's the first mistake I had. My priorities were in the wrong place. Um, but yeah, now on the other side, like I I wouldn't change a thing because I learned and grew so much from all of it. But my mental health definitely took a big impact to the point where I was seeing a psychiatrist at one point. I did get on medication for a mood disorder. I did finally get myself diagnosed with these things that I was afraid of. Essentially, I knew that bipolar ran in my family. I knew that these things were eventually going to catch up with me if they hadn't already. I knew I was avoiding them. And so I would run from them. And I finally got medicated, but it felt like it was too little too late. My wife at the time was at a too little too late, and everything had already kind of gone to shit at that point. And that helped kind of just right the ship a bit for the next couple of years, to the point where I just didn't need to take medicine anymore. I was able to cope and learn to cope with everything and learn to get through everything. And it was a good growth opportunity, but that was my own experience. So for you, how did you manage all things mental health, going from no kids to one kid, from one to two, and to where you are today, trying to balance everything?
So that's a great and loaded question. I think I'll start with the fact that a lot of Christian masculinity talks about, to be a great dad, you need to do two things. You need to provide and you need to protect. You need to provide for your family, you need to protect your family. That's something that I've kind of have lived by ish for a while. However, as time has gone on, I've added a third P. So we need to be able to provide, we need to be able to protect, and we need to be able to be present. Because if we can provide and protect, but we're not present, then not only does that not set that standard moving forward for your kids and for your spouses and for your significant others, but also for our mental health. Like, we'll segue that to our mental health. If you're just working to provide, and your family and you've provided a safe location, a safe house, you've provided food, you provide everything, everyone is protected, but something is majorly still going to be missing in your brain if you are not present with your family. So there is a really intricate balance to provide versus be present. And I have a lot of men that ask the question, like, in order for me to be able to provide, I need to work 80 hours a week, which pulls me away. How do I do that and still be present? And I think the biggest thing is be present where your feet are. That's the biggest thing. If you're really stressed, you worked 70 hours this week and you're really stressed about that, do everything in your power to not take that into your home. When you're home and when you're with your family and spending time with your family, be with your family, because evidence shows right now the average 25-year-old spends 7 hours of screen time a day on their phone. Imagine what we can do with 7 hours. I mean, that's between work and home, right? So if you knock that down to 1 hour a day instead of 7, like, set those limits and be present where your feet are. Like, when you're home, be home. When you're at work, be at work. Get stuff done while you're at work so you don't have to worry about it when you're at home. And scrolling Facebook or Instagram doesn't do anything productive for anyone at the end of the day. So, provide, protect, be present. But for me, mental health is something that continues to always evolve. I've seen a lot of different counselors and therapists, like LPCs, over the years, just in terms of like personal development, coaching, like just making sure that whatever blind spots that I continue to have, I continue to work on as I get older. In terms of things that we might not know that we do, or energies or vibes that we might not know we put off, but we do. Like, how do we continue to address those and get better? Because I know, and this is something that my wife and I have continued to work on, is we have both been really, really bad at putting, not that it's bad, but for a relationship with a spouse, when you are both always prioritizing your kids and not prioritizing your relationship, a lot gets lost in translation. So that's been a huge realization for both my wife and myself over time, is that we both pour so much energy into our children that at the end of the day, when we have stuff that's bothering us, like, we're just so exhausted that we didn't want to talk about it, and we would just like watch mindless TV, go to bed, and just do it all over again. And we've had to really find how to reconnect, because there was a challenging time when you go through having young kids, and it's just chaotic from literally the time second you walk in the door to the second they go to bed, plus you're working all the time, plus it's really hard. So for me, mental health has been a lot of those things put together, but also realizing that it's not up to someone else to make you happy. That is also something that takes a lot of growth in anyone to realize. Like, as a spouse, sometimes you feel like I married you like because you make me happy, and you're not making me happy. So that's like that victim mentality of like, that's not their job. Their job is not to make you happy. Your job is to make you happy at the end of the day. So I think taking ownership for yourself, your own mental health, your own happiness, all of those things kind of put together. But my mental health continues to evolve, honestly, every day. So whether it's spending time, whether it's spending time in the Bible and spending time in faith, whether it's having a great conversation, whatever it is that needs to happen that day needs to happen. And I always tell myself I need three wins a day. I need a physical win, I need a mental win, I need a spiritual win every day, to continue with happiness. So whatever that mental win needs to be for you that day, that's what needs to be, whether it's some positive self-talk or some self-affirmations, or whether it's a good conversation with someone who you just haven't connected with in a while, or whatever the case may be. So all of that together, a loaded response for a loaded question.
Man, I got so much to unpack there now.
Yeah.
I should have led with that one. Dang it. Let's see. So society will tell you to put your kids first. Society will 100% tell you put your kids first. Put your spouse somewhere down on the list. Put yourself even further down on the list, right? Which is in all aspects wrong. From what I believe, from what I've been taught, from what I know. I'm also a man of faith. I'm also Christian. The Bible teaches us to put our God first, put our spouse second, put our kids third, and our ministry fourth. And ministry could be like work or people you're serving or anything like that. In a kind of a linear order there. Granted, it's not always linear. Sometimes, things do need to switch to where like your kids take a little bit more priority over your spouse and different situations. So 2 and 3 kind of flip. They're a little fluid from time to time. They're not always a linear kind of thing. Because that's just reality of it. But perfect world, best case, it's 1, 2, 3 kind of thing is linear like that. But society will tell you absolutely not. It's kids first. Put your kids first. All these things. Well, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. If you're not putting your spouse first, then things get lost in translation. You're running through patterns and repeat. You're running on repeat, doing the same thing over and over again. And that's the definition of insanity. That's literal insanity. To where you're running on repeat, routine. You're stuck. You're in a rut, and then when things start bothering you, maybe she's getting mad at you for not doing this chore, and you're mad at her because, well, she keeps leaving her hair on the shower wall, and then like all these little things start to like add up. Everything starts to bother you, kind of thing, and then it just explodes, and you're just like, now you're fighting, and now you're arguing, and now you're like, holy crap, what is going on? And it's just like a hard, like, you just hit that wall real hard, versus prioritizing each other, versus prioritizing your relationship, because like, who are you parenting with? Are you parenting with, unless you're parenting with yourself, that's one thing. But if you're in a household with your significant other, mother of your children, then you're parenting with her. You have to prioritize that relationship to be able to parent, to live, to run a household together, to communicate. You have to be doing all those things together. That's kind of a minimal requirement. And so you have to prioritize that. over your kids, because you can't take care of your kids and at least I believe you can't take care of your kids if you and your partner and you and your wife are on different pages whatsoever. Like, it's gonna be really hard. You guys need to be at least in the same book, but if you're in different sections of the library all together, or even in different libraries, there's a big problem. There's a big disconnect there, and it's gonna pour into your kids, and it's gonna affect them more than anything else, which is what we don't want. Because then, if you guys are fighting, then guess what? You're not present where your feet are. Which I love that saying. Absolutely love that saying. It's so good. Be present where your feet are, because that's where you're needed at that moment. That's where the things are important to you at that moment. If you're at work and your feet are at work, be present at work. Work, and I learned this really early on in my professional career. Just learning, like, work, do all the things you got to do at work, manage your time, focus. You have 8, 9, 10 hours. Do everything you can in that 8, 9, 10 hours. And then whatever you don't get done in the 8, 9, 10 hours, guess what? Tomorrow exists. Get your priorities done. Get the things you have to do done. Get your have tos done. Big things, big projects to accomplish. And then worry about everything else. Prioritize you. Tell people no, I can't help you right now. Sorry, I gotta work on my job. No, I can't take on that project right now. I'm working on 3 other projects right now. Whatever work looks like for you, but prioritize, being able to say no to others, and being able to say no at work, and hold that boundary so that you can work, your time and bound, so that when you're at home, you're fully present at home. You're fully engaged with the household, all those things like that, because that's where you're most needed at the end of the day. How many times have all of us seen a post where it's like, oh, HR, lady died yesterday, HR's cleaning out her desk today and talking about posting her job? Like, that's how much you mean to your work environment. Unless you work for yourself, then you're everything to your job, kind of thing. But it's just, the reality of it. And I love that last thing you mentioned there, having the 3 wins, a mental, physical, and a spiritual win to get through each and every day. So I love that so much. I think that's so cool. So,
Yeah, and then I think when we talk about being able to fill other people's cups, Andy Frisella, the first form 75 hard guy, he has something that he says that I really love. He says you can't be everything to everybody, so you need to be everything to yourself, because if you aren't, you can't be anything to anybody. And really, at the end of the day, it's if you are running on empty, people are going to feel that. If all you do is give, 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 and your life runs on empty, and you can't drink from an empty cup, you can't pour from an empty cup. So at the end of the day, you have to prioritize all of these other things. But if you aren't in a good mental or physical headspace, it's really hard to pour from a cup. So, for me, that's where your physical, your mental, and your spiritual wins come in. Is, even if it's just 5 minutes of something. I went on a 10-minute walk today. I was able to spend 5 minutes in the Word, or I was able to get through morning prayers this morning. And you know what, for my mental health, I listened to a 10-minute podcast on my drive into work that was talking about emotional management, and one point really hit home for me. Like, whatever it is, it doesn't need to take more than 15 minutes for all 3 of those wins, like, together. But if you are empty, everyone feels that. Your work feels that, your home feels that, your kids feel that, your spouse feels that, your friends feel that. So you can't pour from an empty cup. So you got to figure out what fills yours to help fill other people's.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's so true. You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to be able to fill yours. And you're 100% right. If you think you don't have 15 minutes for a few simple wins, let me see your screen time report. I'll tell you exactly what time of day you have those 15 minutes at the most,
Yeah.
to where they're most accessible for you to get them. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
To where they're most accessible for you to get, because you have it. Just imagine all the things you could do. You pull up your screen time report. Maybe you do work from your phone a lot. Like, I get like 4 or 5 hours screen time a day, but I have to be on my phone a lot for work, texting, calling,
Yeah.
messaging clients, coordinating meetings, things like that. Do I get distracted? Absolutely. I have ADHD.
Yeah.
Can't use that as a crutch, but it is what it is. But you have to balance that. You have the time. You're choosing to spend it in the wrong places. You're choosing
Correct.
to not prioritize the time the right way. You're choosing to do these things. It's a choice. Everything you do is a choice. It's called choice theory. And if you don't know what it is, I'm pretty sure I've broken it down on the podcast before. Basically, everything you do, you have a choice. You have a choice to either do A or B, maybe C or D, kind of thing. Some things are more linear. Some things are a written response. Some things are a slide the bars and prioritize them. Some things are a written response or kind of thing. But essentially, everything you have a choice. Everything you have a choice, and each of those choices is going to have a consequence, good or bad. Like I could stop this recording right now, but if I do, it's gonna have a consequence, kind of thing. And the listener's gonna be like, "Wait, that was really good. She telling me what choice theory is." Or I can choose to keep going, kind of thing. So everything you do has a choice. Everything we do has a choice. You choose everything. Everything you do has a choice. And you can even wrap that back to the Bible in senses. God gives us all a choice. He gives us all our agency. He cares, for us to make those choices, good and bad, because that's who he is. That's what it is. And we have the choices to do those things. We're not forced or ever strong-armed into doing anything at any point. Gives us a choice. He gives us our freedom to do so. Unless you're in prison, then you're not really given much choice, but I don't think you're listening. Actually, I hope in prison you get to listen to the Young Dad podcast. So if you're in prison, drop a comment, let me know. Tell your guard and tell your warden that you want me to come and talk to you guys. I'll be happy to come and sit down with you guys. I think that'd be dope. Wouldn't be my first time going and talking to people in prison. It's a lot of fun being in those environments. They're very supportive, but it's a lot of fun. But yeah, choice theory, basically, you have a choice. Everything you do is a choice. You choose to either open up Instagram while your kid's sitting next to you on the couch and to scroll and to watch it, or now hear me out. This is gonna be crazier. This is gonna be crazy. Okay, you have a choice to take this, put it down, look up, start talking to your kid, start asking them if they want to play a game, and just leave that phone where you put it down. Just leave it. It's not going nowhere. It's just gonna grow legs and disappear. Nothing's that important. Those notifications are still going to be there. Those emails are still going to be there. You don't got to reply to them. Those work emails, guess what? They can wait till tomorrow. Make that choice. Yeah. Make the right choice that's going to be most impactful so that you can be present where your feet are. I love that saying. I'm going to adopt that saying. If you see that in my bio from now on, it's because of you. So know that you impacted that and influenced it, because that's such a beautiful, powerful thing right there. Be present where your feet are. Yeah. And that was one thing I'm taking away from this, along with those 3 wins, because you have the time. Make the time. Make the choice to have the time. Make the choice to fill your cup. Make the choice to communicate with your wife and say, hey, love, I love you, but I need 30 minutes to go for a walk or something. For me, I'll give that back to you. I'll do 30 when I'm back, or do you want to take 30 first and then I'll take 30 kind of thing? Like I got you. But if you can't even do that, you got some other things to work on first, some communication to work on first that's been missing. So I would invite you to go and do that first. But you have time. You just got to choose to make it. You got to choose it. So that's my spiel. Absolutely. Another great choice for everyone to make before we wrap up here is to get on the June app. Sponsor of today's podcast, the June app. If your child is struggling with behavior, habits, routines while at school or at home, well, June might be worth a try. This new app combines a video game that kids love with important tasks and habits that you want them to practice daily. You want them to be putting their shoes away, putting their backpack away, and have a really solid after-school routine? Well, June app's perfect. If you want them to have a better morning routine, actually get up, brush their teeth, do their hair, learn to be self-sufficient in the morning, pick up their own clothes, do all these things, guess what? You can put all those tasks into the June app. They don't have to complete them to earn their coins to take care of their pet. Kind of like Neopet or Tamagotchi in 2024. It's really cool. But you also get to build habits and routines. So if you know Tamagotchi, you know what I'm talking about. Talking to all my millennial parents out there. Give the app a try for free and use my code YNGDAD to earn 25% off. And see why almost 1 million families and over 1,000 therapists, myself included in both those numbers, are recommending June. And visit joonApp.io/YoungDad to learn more. Of course, that link and everything is going to be in the description of the episode, along with the link to our link tree where you can find all the deals, specials, promos, and partners of the Young Dad podcast there. So without any further ado, Eric, tell us where the people can find more of you, where they can connect with you. Obviously, if they go down to the description of the episode, they'll be able to find all the links I posted to find you. But if they're too lazy to do that, tell them where they can go and search for you.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the All Things Dad podcast can be found anywhere where you get your podcasts. So make sure you check that out. Rate it, subscribe, share it with people who you think might benefit from some of that information as well. But you can also check out the blog. It's called allthingsdadblog.com, as well as Instagram, YouTube, Facebook at allthingsdad1. So check it out. Drop me a line if you're interested in talking or have any questions, and we can get you moving in the right direction. So thank you guys so much for listening and for your time today.
We need to hit up Meta so that you can get the All Things Dad handle without the one sometime soon. So
Yeah.
I'll hit up Zuckerberg for you and see if he can do something for you. I don't know him, but I'll try. Without any further ado, thank you guys. We're going to go cough, and you guys have a good day.
Yeah, thanks.